Well, let me start. And I want to start with thank yous. Twice I received wonderful flowers. One's from the Daughters of the King here at Good Sam. And they really helped. I just enjoyed them, drank them in, watched them, smelled them. Family did too. So I wanted to thank the folks who brought the flowers. I got tons of cards, and I'm really thankful for the cards. Chocolates from somebody who I hid away and enjoyed. All these prayers and kindnesses really it kept me going. And I'm deeply appreciative. And it made a difference. So let me tell you what happened. Because the effects of what happened are still with me. If you remember, the last time I taught this class, I was short of breath. If you were here, you might have remembered I was huffing and puffing and so on. Well, I thought it was asthma. And so I was using my inhaler. When I got off a plane in Chicago from a trip to Los Angeles, when I got on the plane, I was fine. When I got off the plane, I was short of breath. So I immediately thought asthma, get my inhaler, no big deal. And so I started to use the inhaler, thought it would fix things. And then the next day, I played golf. Hit the ball pretty good. But I was, swinging, walking, swinging, all these things, and still short of breath. And so the next day I thought, well, it's the inhaler. It just takes time for the inhaler to kick in. But it wasn't kicking in. And so the next day, which was a Wednesday, I believe it was May 31st was a Wednesday, I was still at home this morning. Family members were beginning to say, Dad, you're short of breath. And I was saying, yeah, it's asthma. And then it literally now, at 1:28 in the afternoon, I am sitting at my desk at home in my study, working on some stuff. And I had this nudge from the Holy Spirit. I can only call it a nudge from the Holy Spirit. Call Paoli Family Practice. Now, my doctor at Paoli Family Practice is Dr. Gillen. Maybe some of you have Dr. Gillen. I think he's the best doctor there, probably the best doctor in a lot of places. And you can't get in to see Dr. Gillen. It's 4 to 6 months when you make an appointment with him. And he and I had become friends over the years. So I called up and I got some nice person on the phone. And they said, what's going on? And I said, well, I'm short of breath. I think it's my asthma. But if I could get in, that'd be great. If I could see Dr. Gillen, that would be really great. Thinking, no chance. And the voice said, if you can get here in 15 minutes, you can see Dr. Gillen. I hopped up from my desk, grabbed a light jacket, headed out the door and said to the family as I was heading out, I can see Dr. Gillen. I got 15 minutes. And so I got in. There he is. Since we're friends, we just started talking. And then he said, what's going on with you? And I said, well, I'm short of breath. And he said, okay. And he had a physician's assistant with him and so on, and they were looking at me and they started to do some tests. Me thinking all the while it's just asthma. And after about 20 minutes, he turned serious and he said, I'm sending you to the emergency room. They will be waiting for you. And I said, wow. And he didn't say more than that. So I said, well, okay. So I get in my car, drive myself to the emergency room, called Debbie up on the phone and said, well, I'm going over to the emergency room. We'll figure out what's going on. And so I got to the emergency room and all the things you do to check in and so on. And the people were waiting for me. And it surprised me because they immediately put me in a wheelchair. And took blood and so on and so forth. And we went into one of those cubicles at Paley. Some of you might be familiar with them. So I'm in there, I'm talking to Deb and not thinking too much about what's going on. And a physician's assistant came in. She was a bright young woman and didn't seem all that concerned. I wasn't all that concerned. And she said, we're going to take some more blood. And took some more blood. And then she came back. She looked a little more concerned. And she said, we're going to do an MRI, which is where they inject some kind of fluid into you and they can take pictures and so on. So I thought, sounds kind of fun. I actually thought to myself, sounds kind of fun. I've never had that before. And so it was an interesting procedure, and I was asking questions about the procedure, and they were trying to quiet me down and so on and so forth. And the procedure ended, and went back to the same cubicle, Debbie sitting there. And then the young woman came back, the physician's assistant, and she's not smiling. And she said, we've discovered something, and the pulmonologist will be coming soon. And so I thought, well, okay. And so he was a fine pulmonologist. He was from, my bet is he was from Persia. And so he came in, and he looks at me, and he sits down, and he said, I'm on a gurney, and he said, well, this is a quote, well, you have huge blood clots on your lungs. And I didn't know much about blood clots. I thought, well, all right. And then he's looking at me. He's looking at me with this funny expression, like, why are you still alive? And so he said, but your heart is very strong. And so I said, well, I used to play basketball, played for a number of years. And he said, that is why. Your athletic heart, your basketball heart is keeping you alive. And so they were beginning to catch my attention by this time. But still, I wasn't, in fact, throughout the entire experience, I only became afraid one time. I'll tell you about that in a minute. So anyway, I was admitted into what I later discovered was critical care. And continued tests, and at one point I had 5 doctors visiting me, and they all happened to visit me at the same time. They said, this has never happened before at Paoli Hospital. Cardiologists, hematologists, pulmonologists, hospitalists, all at the same time in my room. And they're all looking at me like this. Because they didn't know why I was still alive. As it turns out, I later saw, after this was all over, they showed me the pictures. The pulmonologist showed me the pictures. There were blood clots in my lungs, and there was a blood clot the size of a quarter right next to my right ventricle, which could have broken off at any time. And if it had, I would not be spending time with you today. So that was how precarious it was. They did not tell me this, but they put me in, I'm in a bed now, and they're not letting me move. You can imagine how hard that would be for somebody like me, probably. So I can't move, and so I was, for 3 days, I was in critical care. They immediately put me on blood thinners, which I'm still on, will be on for the remainder of my life. And finally, on 6 days later, I was discharged from the hospital because the blood clots had dissolved. Praise God, the blood clots had dissolved. The more sobering news was that my heart and lungs, they said, have been damaged. The good news, though, is, in their words, they should heal. But they haven't healed yet. So that's why I'm sitting. That's why I'm sitting. You know, I might sound a little short of breath to you today. It's a little bit frustrating. I'm walking real slow. In fact, I was at St. Pat's the other day, and church was over, and I walked out on the sidewalk, and there was an elderly couple ahead of me on the sidewalk. And I was thinking, oh man, I want to get to the car, and there they are ahead of me. All right, be patient, so on and so forth. And then they increased the distance between us. And I thought, that is so pitiful. That is so pitiful. You must be walking really slow. And I've noticed, you know, things, normal things. I get tired more quickly than I would in the past, and as you can tell, when I speak, I'm short of breath. My attitude is, all right, work with what you got. Work with what you got. After everything was done, I went back and saw Dr. Gillen. He wants to see me more regularly now. And when I walked in, the look on his face, if you know this man, the look on his face was one of utter amazement that I was alive. And he had a doctor, a young woman who was also a doctor, and he walked her through what had happened, and she was in the office, and she just kept shaking her head like, he shouldn't be here. He shouldn't be here. Well, I'm here, and at the end of that conversation, one thing that was quite sobering, but also encouraging sign that God really does exist. He said, I didn't tell you this when you were here, but I'll tell you now. If you hadn't called, you probably would have died that night at home. And I thought, that wouldn't have been good. It would have been hard on Debbie and everybody else. So I feel like my life has been given back to me. I feel like my life has been given back to me, and I have to accept present limitations, which is not always easy for me. I'm just going to accept it. I walk slow and get shorter breath, but I get to, here I am spending time with you on a Sunday morning. And And I'm going to continue to do so. And I now find myself as theologian in residence at Good Sam. What that means is I'm Sunday mornings, there'll be something going on in here. It makes me smile after all those years I spent with some of you who are sitting here. 22 years, I bet it was, at least, going through different things on Sunday mornings. That's going to continue. We're going to finish up a different way. I have a little time this morning, might even review a little bit this morning. My life's been given back to me. One doctor said, "You are," this was a different doctor, but he said, "You are very healthy." And I said, "Well, I'm a little short of breath." He said, "Oh, you're very healthy." And so it's just a matter of time. It's a matter of time, and all these doctors want to see me on a regular basis. I must be a subject of interest to them. But a life given back to one catches your attention. So I'm very thankful. And I'm very thankful for the time that we're going to get to spend together. I feel like what the Lord has done through this for me, as He's growing me in areas where I wouldn't have grown unless this had taken place. I had never been admitted into a hospital in my life until this happened. Never, ever. And I was 73. Never had that happened. And being in the position of, as many of you know, being the position of patient, especially when they're not letting you move, it grows empathy. It grows empathy and compassion for other folks who are suffering. And that's a good thing. That's a good thing for me. The only time that I felt afraid, I mentioned this earlier, was there's a heart monitor. And my normal heartbeat is between 45 and 50, which probably was responsible for saving my life in some ways. And I was, since I didn't realize the seriousness of what was going on, I was constantly, can't I sit up? Can I put my legs over the end of the bed? Come on, let me walk a little bit. And so finally, one of the nurses, all these wonderful people, succumbed to my begging. And so she let down the rail you have, and I swung my legs over the end of the gurney. And suddenly, my heartbeat, which was at 45, shot up to 174. I remember the number once, and I thought, that's not good. I knew I have a blood clot there. That's not good. That's not good. And she looked like it wasn't good, which increased my fear level. Thankfully, it went back down within probably 10 minutes. So I went into what I later learned was afibrillation. But thankfully, that's not a problem anymore. They've given me a medication to prevent that from happening. So it's kind of a situation where what I realized was, I'm not afraid to die. I'd miss you all, but I'm not afraid to die. I never had a fear of dying. It was more a question of uncertainty about what's going on. So that was an encouragement to me. I feel like my compassion for other folks who are suffering physically or emotionally, spiritually, is being lengthened through this. I feel as though the Lord was saying to me and is saying to me, well, there's just some things I want you to learn. Just some things I want you to learn. For example, in desert spirituality, the desert dwellers, who I've written about some, they talk about detachment. Detachment. They talk about attachment and detachment. Attachment, we can become attached to too many things. We can be attached to things that really don't matter. Really don't matter. Usually money, honor, power, so on. Issues that have to do with sexual issues and so on. We can become deeply attached. And they encourage us to detach oneself. And they use a different word in a different language, but the English word would be detachment. And so there's a phrase that's becoming more meaningful to me. No matter. No matter. So, how are you feeling today? You're breathing. That's good. Some of the things that might have been extremely important to me, attachments, and they can become exaggerated, even addictive. No matter. No matter. And the result of detachment, rather than attachment to things that don't matter, is freedom. Freedom. So though I can't breathe well at the present moment, I'm more free probably than I've ever felt in my life. Though I'm walking slow, speaking slow, freedom. So that might be something you can ponder with me in the weeks ahead. Are there things that I've become attached to that really don't matter? It's just not as important as I've believed they were. Almost dying clarifies the mind wonderfully. Wonderfully. So that's why probably in the history of classical Christian spirituality, this is going to sound funny, but I think it's true, meditating upon our death was always an important spiritual discipline. An important spiritual discipline. In the liturgy that I pray, there's at least 5 or 6 times a day I'm reminded that I'm going to die. The last prayer I pray at night ends with, watch over me this night and give me a good death. It's the last thing I pray. Is that morbid? I don't think it's morbid. It's just realistic. It's realistic, and it moves us back to what really matters. If the Lord walked up to you today, smiled gently and said, well, you're heading home at 10 o'clock tonight. See you then. And it's noon. Wouldn't that clarify how you thought about the rest of the day? Wouldn't that waters that had been murky would suddenly become clear? Oh, I got 10 hours. He smiled so I don't feel terribly afraid. But I got 10 hours for what really matters. So the goal would be, I think, of a healthy spiritual life would be that we could bring that perspective into the lives that we're leading now. And the result would be not fear, not anxiety. The result would be wonder at what God is giving us. So for example, if you knew that in that 10 hours, that within those 10 hours, that was going to be the last time you got to see a hummingbird. or whatever is a thing, a creature of beauty or a friendship or whatever it might be, wouldn't it be brought to life and be bright and shining? The Puritans were good at this. They always had what was called memento mori in their home, a memento mori. That I'll translate that, a remembrance of death. So you go into a Puritan household, and there oftentimes beyond the lintel over a fireplace, somewhere prominently, a skull. Yeah. Now, that shocks us, but it didn't shock people back in those days because they lived such a short time. Lifespans were much shorter. And it didn't cause fear. It just sobered you up in a good way. Sobered you up in a good way. Taught you. Can you imagine a child growing up in those days was around death all the time. Always, probably 10 times a year in his community, someone was being laid out at home. And she'd see what it was, what had happened. And there would be that skull on the lintel, clarifying his little mind, her little mind. So I think these are all good things. Not morbid, because we believe in the resurrection of the dead. We believe in the resurrection of the dead. This life is not all that is real. It's not all that is real. Christ is risen from the dead. And it makes all the difference in the world. Makes all the difference in the world. The kingdom of heaven, heaven itself surrounds us. It's present to us. It's not somewhere far away. It's here with us. Think of heaven. I think all this ties together. Think of heaven as a higher dimensional system. Now, what I mean by that is, here we are, we're present together, you're listening to me, you're pondering, I can see it on your faces, you're pondering, you're thinking about now heaven. I look forward to heaven. What is heaven? Heaven is a higher dimensional system, to use fairly technical language. So think of us right now as living, I think this will work, as living in a square. Living in a square. Now think of that square being lifted up into a cube. So our life here is not erased, but it's elevated into a higher dimension, which surrounds us all the time. Now think theologically with me. If that's true, it makes all the sense in the world to realize that in that higher dimension, which is surrounding us all the time, present with us today, we can't see them. We believe in things visible and invisible. Our angels. Angels are present with us today. Probably very interested in what I'm saying. Glory is very near to us. Beauty is very near to us. The kind of glory and beauty and wonders and creatures that would take our breath away if they decided to reveal themselves to us. Now, see, that's reality. That's reality. That's what's real. And our culture has willingly moved away from that by buying into this idea that this world is all there is, Matter is all there is. So let's get as much stuff as we can. Let's have as many sexual experiences as we can. Let's pile up as much money as we can. Let's grab for as much power and honor as we can. All the while surrounded by beings who are thinking they have lost their mind. They have lost their heart. And is it any surprise then that suicide rates amongst young people have skyrocketed? That people are turning to drugs on an unprecedented scale to try to enter into some kind of experience, when in reality there's a much greater glorious experience they could enter into. So, but I think that's encouraging. Not so much the state of our culture, but what's really true. Who knows? An archangel's a big deal, but who knows if Michael's interested in what we're doing today? Or Gabriel. Gabriel appears from time to time. Or, as Scripture will speak of, thousands and thousands of angels who surround us all the time. Folks, that's reality. Not some modern atheist saying all that exists is matter. What God has done, I think this is all fitting together. What God has done is He's elevated matter itself. God likes matter. God likes stuff. And He's elevated matter itself. The Eucharist, for crying out loud. Bread and wine elevated into a new wonder and beauty that we can taste every week. Jesus saying to us, I want to draw nearer to you, and I'm going to give myself to you in the Eucharist in a way that you won't fully understand, but can embrace, can taste. The elevation of matter itself. That is why in the future your bodies will be raised from the dead. I know you might be thinking, well, what if I'm cremated, or what if I've been in the ground for 500 years? Not a problem. It's not, that's Augustine. Not a problem. Augustine said, not a hair. He said, Jesus said, not a hair of your head will be lost. So God has this, because God loves matter, God created matter, it's not a problem then for God to collect and bring back together again what has been lost. That's not a problem. And the angels are incorporeal beings. They're not even made of matter like we're made of matter. Not a problem for God. So, I threw a lot at you. I didn't plan on all that. I threw a lot at you. But this is the gospel. This is what we proclaim every Sunday. Christ has come. Christ has died. Christ is risen. Christ will come again. What could be better? What could be better? So I'll probably be walking slow for a while and talking slow for a while. But inside, I feel like I'm getting younger and younger. Younger and younger. So, well, we got 8 or 9 minutes, 10 minutes. So what do you want to ask me? You want to ask me anything? And we'll get back to a different way next week. Yeah, Marion.
How has this affected your traveling? Because I know you traveled a lot.
Oh, how has this affected my traveling? Well, I really wanted to go to Omaha. Why did I want to go to Omaha? Because the Renovaré Institute was starting a new cohort, and they were based in the Midwest, in Schuyler, Nebraska, and you got to go to Omaha to get to Schuyler. And I was praying and praying and praying. Oh Lord, let me go to Omaha, please. Let me go to Omaha. And the cardiologist said, that's a good goal. Well, I went to Omaha. I went to Omaha. It meant some embarrassing the first time, but it meant in airport terminals being in a wheelchair. But then I grew to kind of like it. In fact, when I got off the plane from Chicago here after midnight, I think it was a couple weeks ago, there were these guys waiting with wheelchairs, and I said to one guy, young guy, I said, well, you won the lotto. And I hopped in the wheelchair, and I was enjoying it. Just, this is nice, relaxing. And he wheeled me right down to all the way in Terminal D, the farthest gate, all the way down to baggage claim. And then he said, keep the wheelchair. I'm not going to use it anymore. So I sat in the wheelchair. My bag showed up, and I made my way out to the curb, and Josh was there with the car, and things were fine. So at first I was resistant, because to be in a wheelchair, now I kind of like it. And so I made it to Omaha. I got a trip in October to California, in Atlanta, for the Renovaré Institute in Atlanta, and some stuff out in California with some university and college presidents. And then in November, I'm going to London. Yeah, I'm going to London. Arrangements have been made to enable me to do this. So I'm traveling. I have to be wise. I can't overdo it, which I'm prone to do. But I have a couple of colleagues that I've worked with for years. One guy's up at Yale with the Center for Early African Christianity. They're making the same trip to London with me. So they're all excited because they know I'm going to be in a wheelchair. They're going to have the wheelchairs, so they get to go to the front of the line for all these. They said, even if you're feeling better, we want the wheelchair. So I'm starting to travel.
That's great.
Yeah. Anything else you want to ask me about?
I want to ask you about that prayer.
Which prayer is that?
Well, the one that you mentioned, that you touch base with your terminal ending. I mean, the dying.
Oh yeah, you did the prayer I pray every night.
You made the comment that in the past, where the skull was present in some form, did that probably? Are you saying when you look at life that way, the shortness of it, the brevity, that you have a higher level of spirituality than in a culture where you're being bombarded with youth is it, yes, where it is, and
Well,
age you have no purpose.
I don't know that I would use the phrase a higher level of spirituality.
Okay.
But what I do know is it brings to mind important realities that our culture has run away from. But our culture can't get away from it. You can't get away from death, right? And so these poor souls are wondering, how do I handle this? And then they're falling into despair and depression and anxiety because they don't know how to deal with the very reality that the Christian faith. God's handled this. It's all right. So the memento mori are important for us because we do drift. We do drift in a direction we don't want to drift because of the culture constantly squeezing on us. Don't remember J.B. Phillips' translation, Romans 12. Be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Don't let the world squeeze you into its mold. I speak with some fervor about these things because our culture, and particularly young people, they're entering into, it's guaranteed to become despairing, alienated from yourself, alienated from the cosmos, all these things. It's guaranteed to happen if we take the steps that our culture is taking, and young people in particular. That's why they're killing themselves. That's why they're entering into despair so early in life. So that's why it's important to remember, and then we can hopefully communicate it to them in a way that maybe it's like throwing a bucket of ice water in their face. Yes, you are going to die, but resurrection. Resurrection. Man, can't beat it. Anything else you want to ask me?
Where are we picking up next week?
We are going to be starting with a brief review. A brief review of first 4 chapters, and then we might start to deal with chapter 5. Reading Christ into your heart is chapter 5. So the Lord bless you and keep you.
And to you.
Chris, it's so nice to
Have a great day. Blessings.
Thank you.